And we are live. Hello to our viewers in Belize and around the world. Thank you for joining us today to learn how you can start your Chevening journey. We extend a big thank you to our viewers who are rewatching this live discussion. Remember, you can still engage with the Belize Chevening Alumni Association by emailing cheveningbelize@gmail.com. My name is Sylvia Bate, and I am a director at Heritage Education Network Belize. I'm also a Chevening alumna. HENB is an NGO that works to promote Belizean culture and heritage. We were founded in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, by 4 Belizean women archaeologists. And together we work to advocate for greater visibility of heritage and archaeology through our flagship initiatives like the Belize Culture Symposium. I invite everybody on the stream and our viewers rewatching this live to visit heritagebelize.org to learn more about how you can have a hand in protecting, preserving, and promoting Belizean archaeology. Tonight, Heritage Education Network Belize is honored to partner with the Belize Chevening Alumni Association to bring to you an engaging panel discussion on the Chevening Scholarship Awards. 2 current scholars and 2 alumni will share their perspectives on their Chevening journey, and they will give you all the tips on how you can be a future scholar. Make sure to ask your questions in the comment section. And with that, please allow me to introduce our moderator for tonight, Mr. Hiro Balani. Hiro is currently the Partnerships and Development Finance Officer under the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator in Belize. Prior to this, he worked at the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, for a year as an operations consultant, supporting the portfolio of projects in Belize. Hiro also holds extensive experience in business development, particularly in trade and investment promotion, and MSME support during his 7 years working at Beltrade. Hiro is a 2018-2019 Chevening Scholar and holds a MSc in International Development Studies focusing on globalization, trade, and industry. He is currently pursuing a Master's of Arts in Project Management online through the University for International Cooperation in Costa Rica under an OAS scholarship. I now invite Hiro to the stream.
Good night, and greetings. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for that kind introduction and for the collaboration of the Heritage Education Network Belize with the Belize Chevening Alumni Association. A pleasant good night to all our viewers in Belize and greetings to all joining us from across the world. It gives me great pleasure to act as moderator for this, our second information webinar, which we hope can be a regular offering for Belizean students and professionals interested in pursuing graduate studies in the UK. The objective of the webinar tonight is to acquaint current and future applicants to the Chevening Scholarship Programme with important information and all you need to know to start your Chevening journey, as well as your application. First, we will have our panelists answer some general questions, and then we will take questions from you, our viewers, through Facebook or YouTube. I'm therefore delighted to introduce our dynamic panelists for tonight. So first up, we have Mr. Randall Shepherd. Randall is an attorney at law, currently employed with the government of Belize as Assistant Solicitor General for the Legislative Drafting Unit. Randall holds a Bachelor of Law and a Master's of Law from the University of the West Indies, as well as a Legal Education Certificate from Norman Manley Law School. As a Chevening Scholar currently, he is pursuing a Master of Arts in Public Policy at Swansea University in Wales. Welcome, Randall. We are also joined by Ms. Deborah Rogers. Deborah recently completed an LLM in Criminal Justice at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland, receiving a Chevening Scholarship Award last year. Having completed a Bachelor of Laws at the University of West Indies, Cave Hill, in 2012, and then her Legal Education Certificate at Norman Manley Law School in 2014, she joined the Judiciary of Belize as a magistrate, where she has been for the past 7 years, currently posted in Orange Walk. Deborah has always been passionate about the law, and pursuing this career is her dream. Warm welcome, Deborah. Next, we have Shanidi Shell Urbina. Shanidi is a current 2022-2023 Chevening Scholar. Professionally, she is employed as Crown Counsel at the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Shanidi obtained her Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of West Indies Cave Hill campus in 2013 and her legal education certificate from Norman Manley Law School in 2015. Shanidi is pursuing an LLM in human rights at the University College London as this year's scholar. Welcome, Shanidi. And the final member of our panel tonight is Ms. Christine Koch. She's the Vice Chair of the Belize Chevening Alumni Association, so one of my dear colleagues, and she was awarded a Chevening Scholarship in 2019. Christine pursued her master's degree in education leadership and management in the UK, and presently she's part of a team building a competency-based curriculum for Belize's first STEAM laboratory school. That's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. As part of her work, she strives to ensure that Belizean education is more equitable and inclusive. Her leadership style is devoted to empowering teachers, students, and youth into lionized change makers. As a lifelong educator, she remains committed to enhancing the quality of education and raising its role around the world. Welcome, Christine. So this rounds out our panel for tonight, and I thank all participants for joining us, inviting you again to kindly post your questions in the chat for our panelists. So now we will commence with a few general questions for our panel, and after that, we'll welcome the questions from the chat and be sure to also share this with them. So first, Christine, can you please explain what is the Chevening Scholarship Program and what it includes?
Sure. Good night, everyone. Let me start off by saying I'm looking forward to a wonderful night with all of you, and I hope that this session is very informative to our audience. To get into the question, what is the Chevening Scholarship Program? It's a UK government international award program, and it offers future leaders a unique opportunity to pursue a 1 year master's degree of their choice at any UK university. So that means that you will live and study in the UK for a year, and this allows you to develop professionally and academically, grow your network, experience UK culture, and of course, build long lasting relationships. It is fully funded, so that means you are left free to focus on achieving your academic goals while enjoying your stay. To answer the second part of that question, what is included in the scholarship? Well, there's a list. You have the cost of one visa application, you have travel costs to and from the UK, your university tuition fees, a homeward departure allowance, an arrival allowance, a monthly stipend, a travel grant to attend Chevening events in the UK, plus, of course, a once in a lifetime experience. So I hope I answered that question thoroughly, Hero.
Thank you. No, thank you very much, Christine. And definitely, it's a comprehensive scholarship. And as you mentioned, it definitely includes a lot. And you are able to really spend that full year in the UK getting your studies done and not having to worry about, the costs of where you will stay or financing. So thanks for that, Christine. So next, we'll move to our next panelist, Deborah. So while we know what the Chevening Scholarship includes and all its benefits, can you share a little bit with us on why Chevening? So why should our viewers at home apply for the Chevening Scholarship?
Well, Chevening is one of the most coveted global scholarships that's out there for your taking. If you've heard about Chevening, chances are you've heard of the Rhodes Scholarship, Erasmus, Fulbright scholarships. But what I like about Chevening and what set it apart from these other scholarship opportunities for me was the diversity of networking that was made available if you are successful in your application. As I mentioned, it's highly coveted. I believe last year there was approximately 64,000 applications worldwide, and to have that narrowed down to about 1,500 recipients lets you have a good idea of just how much you're going up against. And the competitive nature of the scholarship makes being a recipient that much more rewarding. Apart from the benefit of it being fully funded, as Christina explained, you get the opportunity to study at some of the top universities in the UK, Chevening offers this the minute you come into this association. It really doesn't matter what university you choose because Chevening has a list of universities that it networks with and that it works with. So that's why it's important for you to choose your top 3 universities because they would have already been on Chevening's radar. You're entering into a fraternity of like minded individuals who come from richly diverse backgrounds. And if you've never studied outside of Belize, Chevening will certainly give you that experience, as I said, regardless of the institution that you choose. And even if you've studied in the US or the Caribbean or even in Central America, the UK experience is extremely unique in its own way. Chevening, because of its prestige, definitely puts you at an advantage on your return home and, in my view, in all future career plans. As I mentioned, what I most appreciated about Chevening was not just the diversity, but the wealth of support that I got from other Cheveners and from my Chevening officer. There was this close communication that I could forge with my Chevening officer, who was able to answer just about every question that I had in preparing to go to the UK and while I was there settling in. So that just made it a very holistic experience and it solidified my choice in Chevening.
Excellent, excellent, Deborah. Thank you very much for sharing that experience. And no, I definitely also agree with you. You know, during my year, I always felt that my program officer was there. You know, day in, day out, day out. You know, you can contact them, any issues you have. But I also agree with you that the degree in the UK will really help your career. It has helped me, and I'm sure my colleague Christine would also agree, and I also agree with you, Deborah. And I'm sure Randall and Shanidi, we're looking forward to when you come back as well. So well, let's move to one of our current scholars. I think it's also good to get your perspective. I know it's very late in the UK, but thank you for joining us both, Randall and Shanidi. So Randall, well, can you share with viewers what was the application process like from start to finish?
Sure, thank you, Hero. And good night, everyone, and welcome to this Chevening information webinar. I will start off by saying that the application process for a Chevening scholarship is approximately or almost a year long. So submitting your Chevening application online is actually only the beginning of the application process. This really kickstarts several other stages that will follow. So once you have submitted your application, online, the next stage is really to be notified if you have been shortlisted for an interview. Chevening normally informs applicants around mid-February of the following year. And once you have been shortlisted, the next step will be to really schedule a date for the interview using the same application portal that you're using to submit your Chevening application. Interviews normally take place in the months of March or April. I believe my interview was mid-April. I think it was April 14th. And so you could actually start preparing yourself for that interview once you know you've been shortlisted. During my time for preparation, what I did a lot of practice questions. I researched because there's a lot of information that you could find on the internet through YouTube. There are people from different countries, other Chevening scholars, past scholars who have done mock videos and show you what possible questions would be. And so that's what I use to really help bolster myself for the Chevening interview. If you are then successful in the interview, you will officially become a Chevener and you can expect to be notified of your success sometime around June of 2023. And this really then kickstarts a whole additional range of stages. The first step would be to inform Chevening of at least one unconditional offer for a UK university by July 13. At some point, once you have chosen your university, you will be provided what is called a CAS, which is a confirmation of acceptance for studies. And this is really needed for your student visa application. I advise that once you have received your CAS, try to act as quickly as possible and complete your student visa application, as the process normally takes. They will advise you that it takes 3 to 5 weeks. I find that when we did ours, it actually took the 5 weeks. And so I actually got back my student visa probably the Wednesday, and school was starting the following Monday. And so it really becomes a rush. And so a part of this stage is really the moment you've been informed of your cash right to submit the online application to get your student visa. For the visa process, which is another step of the application process, this is something that will take place in Mexico City. So you will do the application online, and you will have to visit Mexico City for your interview. I would advise as well that there are two possibilities. In my cohort, what some persons did, they got a temporary passport because you will need to leave your passport in Mexico City. So what some persons did is that they got a temporary passport. Others of us got an affidavit, which is provided by the Mexico embassy, the Belize embassy in Mexico, sorry. And for that process, what you will need to do is to provide 2 copies of a passport picture. You will need to provide as well a deposit of $20 US, which could be paid once you've arrived in Mexico City. And you will also need a copy of your passport. The embassy for Belize in Mexico is very helpful. And what I did prior to visiting, we had actually emailed them and they informed us what we needed to provide. And we were able to submit that information online to make the process much quicker once you've gotten to Mexico City. Also, when you're applying for your student visa, you will have to select, since there is no UK consulate that could process a visa application in Belize, you will have to actually put Mexico as your residence and then travel to Mexico for your interview, which is a really easy process. You will just have to take with you your CAS as well as your passport and your entry slip into Mexico City or into Mexico. We traveled through Chetumal and then flew from Chetumal to Mexico City. And then the final stage, once you've completed, that student visa application, if you actually received your student visa, the final stage would be to travel to the UK. This is actually facilitated by Chevening. There's an agency that will also book your ticket for you, as that is financed by Chevening. Once again, you've received your student visa, try to act as quickly as possible because, as Debbie said earlier, there are about, in our year, over 1,400 students that have been awarded the scholarship. And so you could just imagine the agency trying to book tickets for everyone. And so if you could act quickly as possible, that will really make the process much smoother. There are times when you might actually have to end up calling, just to see what is going on, because there's so much tickets to be booked that you might not get a response as quickly as possible. When you're submitting, they advise you that it will take them about 7 to 10 days for you to get a response. And so the quicker you're able to do that, the better. So that really takes you through the application process. It starts with submitting your application online up until the point of next year, September, when you'll be traveling to the UK to start your studies.
Excellent. No, thank you, Randall. And I think you've walked us through that entire year and all the different steps. So I think one of the key points to remember is to manage your expectations. As I think we've all gone through that, where you submit your application, you need to be patient, and there are these different steps that Randall has detailed and outlined. So I think maybe Shanide, I wanted to also ask you if you had anything else to add, or maybe throughout that, all of those processes, what is one that you would want to highlight as maybe the most challenging, or that you would want scholars to be aware of?
Hi, good night, everyone. As Randall mentioned, it is a very long process, so I would just advise to prepare so that when you get the good news that you have been chosen for Chevening, you're ready to go. I would also want to add, though, that the minute you find out that you've been chosen for Chevening, that you contact maybe the Belize Chevening Alumni Association, so that you may be put in touch with other Chevening scholars. I think that was something that made it better for us. We did our visa application as a group, in the sense that we traveled from Belize to Mexico City together, and I think it is much more easier. I would say it is easier on the scholar to do it together as a group, as opposed to trying to figure it out on your own as you're going along, because we need to be mindful of the deadlines, and you don't want to, of course, reach late for classes. So definitely it made it easier for us to do it as a group. So networking should begin from home.
Excellent. And no, I definitely love hearing that, Chanidi. And I agree with you. I also, in my year, I traveled with another applicant that was successful. We went to Mexico. It makes it an experience. And you're right, you start the networking early, which is one of the key areas that many applicants would see is on the 4 essays that you need to write, right? So I think moving along with our panelists and some of our general questions, I'd like to ask Christine. So why study in the UK?
Sure thing, Hero. After listening, after listening to Randall's explanation, um, you're quite overwhelmed to listen to how many things you have to do before you even get to the UK. But why study in the UK? Tip: this is actually one of the many questions they could ask you during your interview. Um, the UK universities consistently rank highest in global university ranking, as many have world leading reputations for teaching and research. And so, also, UK universities are associated with high quality education. And so, earning a degree from one of the many UK highly regarded universities could actually or will actually aid your career progression. So, wherever in the world you end up, UK university will be recognized by employers, universities, and also governments.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Christine, for that. And you're right. The rankings speak for themselves. And I think that, just having the opportunity to have a fully funded master's degree from the UK is an added, I would say, asset to your career, to your CV. So definitely, it is a great opportunity. So I'll now move maybe to Deborah. If I could ask you the following question. And I think many of our viewers may want to know this as they prepare their applications and for the interviews to come. So, what would you say are the pillar qualities of a Chevening scholar?
Well, I think if for most of our viewers who have started their Chevening application or are at least doing their research about the scholarship, one of the first things that they're going to come across is that Chevening is always looking for leaders and agents of change. That's the phrase that they always use, agents of change. How are you a leader? And of course, some of us are natural leaders and some of us grow into these positions. So Chevening wants to see how you exhibit your leadership qualities. And in doing so, you need to exhibit instances where you can formulate and execute certain objectives, but more importantly, where others were able to follow your plan and to effect positive change in your networking circles. I think another important trait of Chevening scholar is that you're a good communicator. You have to be able to express yourself clearly, succinctly, without being easily shaken. You have to be able to think on your feet. It's good to do that. And most importantly, I think what's good to show is that even though you have leadership qualities, you're not arrogant about it. It's about that familiarity and being able to connect with people. Apart from that, I also think it's important for you to be quite disciplined and consistent in pursuing your objectives. I'm sure that for those of you who haven't submitted your application as yet and you're still burning the midnight oil on it, I'm sure we can all agree that it takes quite a lot of determination and commitment to keep working on those essays and to continuously perfect our core goals. So even though you might have the drive to start this application, I'm sure halfway through those essays, you're ready to kick the bucket and be like, you know what, I'm not up for this, because it may look easy on face value, but when you actually get to putting pen to paper, it's actually quite challenging to formulate and to keep up with presenting your best application. But most importantly, I think the best character trait, and even though this may be subjective, is to just be yourself, be you. What is unique about you? What do you bring to the table that is so different from all these applications? Because chances are majority of these applications are going to list some of those same qualities that I listed before. But what is so special about you? Don't be afraid to show your personality in your application. That is what gives you that added edge. It's what makes your application stand out from the lot.
Could not have said that better myself, Deborah. That is a very clear and very relevant message for all our applicants. I really like how you mentioned to just be yourself, but also, to have that humility and highlight what makes you unique. And I think that's exactly something that will be very helpful in your application. So thank you, Deborah. I may come back to some of our other panelists to add, but in moving along with our we have two more general questions, and we see some comments. Notice that many are thanking us for the information so far. So we're glad that the information is informative and relevant. So I'll now move to asking Randall, for potential candidates interested to pursue a master's degree, which comes first, the scholarship application or the university admission application? Or are they in parallel? Can you explain some of that timeline again?
Sure. Thanks, Hira. I would say definitely work on them in conjunction with each other, keeping in the back of your mind that you have a deadline for your Chevening application, which is coming up pretty soon. And so what I did in my process, I kind of focused on the Chevening application first, remembering also that a lot of the essay questions in your Chevening application can be used for your university application, because a lot of the times the universities will ask you why you're choosing, this particular university. One advice would be to definitely check when is the deadline for application for the universities that you have chosen. Sometimes you'll find that they have varying deadlines. Some might be maybe in December, others might be in January. So I would say at the start, focus as much as you can on completing your Chevening application, ensuring that you submit it by the deadline. If you can submit it even a couple of days before, please do that, because as it gets closer to the date, if everyone is submitting, you might run into some technical difficulties. So try to submit as soon as possible. I know it can be a bit weird because you're trying to go through your essays as much as possible. I read them so many times before I submitted, and then finally reached a point where I said, okay, Randall, sure, fine. You're good. Go ahead and just submit. And I think I had submitted at least 2 days before the deadline. It was a self-relief, but the process is interesting and challenging, I could say, because you want to really present and put your best foot forward. Once you've been able to then submit your Chevening application, then you could focus on your school applications. And again, like I said, you'll be able to use maybe some of the same information from your essay questions in the Chevening application to supplement as, giving the school why you're choosing that university. At this point, you'd have already searched your top 3 universities. Maybe you've figured out, okay, I want to go to this school because it's one of the top ranked in the areas that I want to focus on. And so you'll be able to give them that information as a part of your essay for the university.
Excellent. No, and thank you for sharing that, Randall. And I think one of the key tips Randall just gave to everyone is submit 2 days early. And I will say that is key. Waiting for the last minute is also something to bear in mind with the application itself. The system may get crowded, so you wouldn't want to run that risk. And so thank you, Randall. And I think you've outlined the timeline very clearly. So as our last question, and then we move to taking all the questions in our chat. So again, remember, if you have questions while anyone is speaking, put them in the chat and we will get to them as we move in this webinar. So for our last question, for Shanidi, what would be 3 key tips that you would give potential candidates to when preparing for their Chevening interview?
Hi, so 3 tips I would give to potential candidates are: firstly, observe the timeline. I don't think we can emphasize enough the timeline. Deadline is November 1st, 2022 to submit, but that is only the beginning of the entire application process. So be mindful of the dates that are coming up so you don't miss any important deadline. Secondly, I would say research as much as you can when it comes to choosing your universities. this is your opportunity to choose a university, to choose a course that aligns with your development goals. So try to do as much research as you can, where it is that you want to study, which city. Do you want to study in London? Do you want to study in Scotland? What course are you interested in? You know, you can apply for, you can choose 3 similar courses at different universities, or you can choose 3 different courses at the same universities. So I think research is very important. Thirdly, I would say to use the STAR approach when writing your essays. You know, detail what was the situation, what was the task, what was the action that you took, and what were the results in this situation. um, as a final tip, I would want to say, if you have someone who can peruse your essays, please make use of a fresh pair of eyes. You know, sometimes we think that we have our essays written perfectly, but when you pass them along for someone else to peruse, they offer you some comments, and I think it's worth having someone peruse your essays.
Thank you so much, Shanidi. Those tips are very, very relevant, and I really like the STAR approach. I think, without even knowing it, I think I was using that approach, but I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think when you're writing your essays, I would definitely use that when you're speaking about your approach, your experience. So be sure to keep that in mind. So now let's move to the comments and some of the questions that we have from our viewers online. So again, I invite all of our viewers, if you have a question now, please put it in the chat, and we will have our panelists address some of them, right? So first I'm seeing Victoria is asking, how did you choose your top 3 universities? There are so many options and all seem wonderful. Maybe I could ask Christine, how did you go about selecting yours?
Um, to be quite frank, the way I went about selecting my university was to see whether or not they would accept my university degree. Because I did my bachelor's at the University of Belize. And what I noticed was that it's not internationally accredited. So some of these universities, even though I wanted to go to them, they would tell me no, that they wouldn't accept it. So that was my first draft of, I looked at all of the UK universities that were available, and I started to look at education in particular. I made an entire list. And before I selected my universities, what I did was I contacted or emailed them and say, this is the situation and this is my degree, and so forth. And I was just wondering if, my degree would be accepted. And I started, marking some X, because they would respond and say no. Some would say no directly. Some would say, oh, you would need to do an English exam. And so that was how I went about drafting first. And then it came down to the last 3, which was the ones that I applied to. So that was how I went about selecting my universities. And it just so happened that the university that I got accepted to, one of the professors had written a book that I was really interested in. And so I ended up going there, which was, it worked out for me eventually. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And I think there's no one size fits all to really selecting, your top 3. Shanidi mentioned something key. They can be, 3 different programs or similar programs, but looking out for what makes that university stand out and what draws you to them based on your career goals is very important. So again, research, contact the university. I think Christine covered a lot of that, right? So let's look at the next question we have here from Cherise. Do I have to submit an academic and a professional reference? I have 2 excellent professional references, and I would rather go with those. I graduated in 2016, and I think my professional references are better poised to gauge my potential. So maybe I'll ask Deborah if you could weigh in on this one.
Okay, so for me, I did not tender academic references. I had a big gap from when I finished law school to actually applying. So it didn't really make sense for me to try to get in touch with a lecturer who probably wouldn't remember me to give an academic reference. But what I would say about your reference is that choose persons who are able to speak to your abilities to be productive in the program of your choice. Have that reference be able to support the fact that you can keep up with the workload, and who can confirm that whatever skill set you're bringing in your application is going to be relevant to your objective. So I submitted two professional references, and those were the same references that I used in my school applications and for my Chevening application. I didn't change a thing, but that may vary depending on your area of study and what program you choose. So also look at what your program requires, because some programs are very specific about the type of references that they require in the application process. So yeah, that's what I would go with.
Perfect. No, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think there is a checklist, to Cherise. If you go online in terms of what the referee or your reference needs to cover, so they need to speak about your professional experience or intellectual capabilities. So that's, I think, what Deborah mentioned is spot on, right? So I see here a question from Christy. Do you need to take the GRE? So I think just to cover this one quickly, it really depends on your university. In my case, I didn't have to. I think in some of our colleagues, maybe, I'm not sure if anyone from our panel had to take any GRE or any exams. Okay, I'm seeing Randall, no, Shanidi, Christine, no, Deborah. So yeah, so I think to answer that question, if your university requires you to sit an exam before, it really depends, but it's not common practice. So I think I'll ask Randall if you could cover the question from Christy. How long did it take to get a response from your universities after applying?
So it really varies. I applied to three different universities. I actually got my first response sometime in January. I got probably two. I got response from two of my universities that I applied to early January, which was good. And the other one, I didn't hear from them until sometime around, I believe, March or April. And so it really varies, which university you're applying to. Some of them might respond really quickly. What I would say will also be helpful is trying to submit that application again before the deadline for the university. So I kind of immediately after finish completing my Chevening application, I went into full mode of trying to complete my university applications as well, so that I could submit, so to ensure that I would have at least an unconditional offer by the time it was needed for Chevening, which thankfully I was able to get one.
Perfect. Yes, I think that's excellent, and it varies. You're right. From, I would say, anywhere from 2 weeks to a month or more. So universities have different timelines, right? So I think, oh, Deborah, you wanted to add to that?
Yes. To
Yeah,
add
sure.
to what Randall was saying, remember we're still at the tail end of COVID. So when I lodged my application, universities were strictly online. Everything was by email, and it took forever for them to go through those emails. Don't be afraid to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and make that call to the UK. I had to make several calls to my university of choice. It's not necessarily that you don't get in or that they haven't responded. It's just the paperwork process of them dealing with everything online. So I will tell you, making those calls and just making various inquiries and finding out exactly who the right point of contact is can make a big difference in how quickly you're able to get that acceptance letter and upload and update your application.
Thanks. Thank you for that, Deborah. Definitely. I think, we've all been through different timelines, and I think that's a real key part to keep in mind, right? So I think the next question we have here, Nazli. Nazli is asking, do you have any tips on networking? So I know, Shanidi, you mentioned, what was helpful for you is contacting the Alumni Association or networking with alumni before, but do you have any other tips on networking?
For networking, I would just say update your profile, your Instagram, your Facebook, your LinkedIn, um, and just when chosen for evening, just try to connect with as much people as you can, even if you know someone who is applying to the same universities as you. It all begins from there, I would say, even before you have been chosen for evening. Once you have been, then there are, I think, many networks that one joins. There's the general Chevening network that we join, and then there are the various networks in your universities, at the place you're living. So I would just say, just be as open as you can, as welcoming as well, to build on the networking. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any Randall, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I would say that also you could do a simple search on Facebook. A lot of these groups have Facebook groups or they'll create WhatsApp groups. Actually, one of the Chevening scholars from, I think he's from Nairobi, he found me on Facebook. He added me to a WhatsApp group. And so there's so many different groups. There's a WhatsApp group for the Caribbean Cheveners. There's a WhatsApp group for your university Cheveners. Your school will have a Facebook page that you could join where you could maybe get updates on things even before you reach, if you have questions, so that's a good way to start the networking even before leaving, trying to find these groups on Facebook, maybe looking when you hashtag Chevening, things will pop up. And so that's a good way to initiate the networking process.
Excellent. No, thank you. Thank you very much, Randall. So moving to our next question here, I'm seeing Josie is asking, what advice would you give to previous applicants who were not successful in previous years and are adamant to reapply? Maybe I'll ask our panel here, did anyone apply multiple years? Or were we
I
all...
actually abandoned my first application. I let self-doubt prevail. But I will tell you, in speaking to other successful colleagues and previous batchmates of mine, their encouragement really helped, and reaching out for their assistance and support through the application process really gave me that boost of confidence. And the second time around, hey, it was successful. That is what the association is here for. And that's what, as Shanide mentioned, don't be afraid to hit us up on Facebook. That's why we're trying to have more of these, forums for you to get as much information as possible. I remember during my application process, I didn't even know a Belize Chevening Association existed. I was reaching out to past batchmates of mine from UWI. And so to know that this association is here to help you, tap into that resource. The application fee is free. Apply and apply and apply until you get it right. There are people who have applied 3-4 times and they get it right eventually.
Totally agree, and that was my contribution. I would say I've known a few scholars that maybe in the first time they didn't, but the second they did. So my advice as well on that to you, Josie, is be adamant. Your comment says are adamant to reapply. So I would definitely say go for it. If you have your documents ready, just submit. And the deadline is November 1st, so there is still time for everyone that's listening in. I saw someone ask when is the deadline. So again, November 1st, mark your calendars, everyone. We can move to this question from Christy. What makes your resume appealing? Anyone wish to take that one?
I could chime in on this. I would say really your resumes are really standard things, trying to outline your educational background and your experiences. I think what is really very important for Chevening is really the essays. And so trying to explain how you display leadership qualities, trying to explain how you will network, trying to explain as best as possible, because you have a very limited word count. 500 words is not a lot of words. So you're trying to condense within 500 words as best as possible, how you exhibit these characteristics. And so I would say, yes, you have your standard resume outlining these things, but try to spend sufficient time on formulating your essays, capturing your experiences and how through those experiences you display leadership qualities and how you're an influencer and as well, how you're capable and how you have networked over the years through your professional life.
Perfect. Thank you, Randall. Would anyone
Um,
else like to add? Yeah, Shanide, go ahead.
yeah, I just wanted to add that for the purposes of the application, you do not need to upload your resume unless something has changed. Your CV, you must only upload it when it comes to your application to the universities, for which if you don't have it ready now and updated, you have until early next year to update your CV.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Shanidi. So I think, Randall, you were going through maybe the next question here. Any tips on writing about leadership and being an influencer or being influential? I think Nazli here. So I know two of the questions, and correct me if I'm wrong, to our recent applicants, Randall and Shanidi, but one of the questions is on your leadership experience, and I think that is where you talk about how you influence. So any tips on writing that essay particularly?
Yeah, definitely. I would say I kind of tried in my essay. I remember at least using two examples from my current employment, showing how within my environment I am really a leader. And so I kind of tried to outline what I thought, or what I think considers what would be considered as a leader, and showed through my essay and through my experiences and what I've done in my workplace to become a leader. Trying to be engaging with others, ensuring that persons feel that there's a room or there's a space for that type of discussion, because as a leader you'd have to be able to facilitate different views and all of that. So I kind of focus as much as possible on my experiences and what I've done to be a leader.
If I could add, Hero, just like what Randall said, and this was a comment made earlier by Shanidi, that one of the tips when it comes to writing your essays, you can use two examples of what you're doing right now in your current place of employment, and you explain it in a way where you explain the situation, the task, the action, the result. Sometimes because I've had the opportunity to read some essays, and I think because it's 500 words, what the applicant tries to do is try to just list out a lot of leadership, experiences that they've had. But what helps is for it to be structured in a way that we could see that there was a situation, this was a task at hand, this was the action that you took or you and your team took, and this was the result. This was the result of you spearheading such task. And I think that really helps to guide you when you're writing your essays.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christine, for that. And again, SMART. I truly love that acronym, Shanidi. Thanks for bringing that up. So if we move to our next question here from Martha, may I submit my application before November 1st? Short answer, yes. You are highly encouraged to do so. But I think on the second question, I'll defer to some of our recent applicants. So can you submit without your educational documents and references?
Yes, you can. And I was just looking at the timeline for this year, so it seems that it is remaining the same. You submit your application online, and then you have until, I believe, early February to submit your educational documents and your references.
Perfect. So there you go, Martha. I think again your Chevening timeline is already up on the website. So just go to the Chevening Scholarship website and you should be able to see those requirements, right? I'll move to the question from Bree. Are applicants responsible to cover the cost of university applications if they choose to apply before a response from the Chevening committee? I think that links to Victoria's question on application fees for university and how did you make payments to the university if it's applicable. So maybe we can tackle those costs and whether if there's, I guess the question is whether there's a reimbursement or any type, or is it responsible for the applicant? So any insights on that, panelists?
So
Um,
yes.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Randall.
Sure. Yes, so we are responsible, or you will be responsible for the application fee on your own. That is not something that will be reimbursed by Chevening. Most of the schools in this day and age, you'll be able to make that payment. If you have a credit card, you'll be able to make that payment online. So they would have an online system and you just make the payment there.
If I can add too, it is also helpful for you to communicate with the school and see whether or not they're a Chevening partner, because if they are, then they would understand that Chevening would cover all expenses. And so what I did was I had to, there was a price that I had to pay, but I emailed them and explained to them that I was part of the Chevening, I was applying for Chevening, and they said, okay, no problem, we'll process your application and you don't have to pay the fee. So it's all about communication. Some schools, I know of some colleagues who said, regardless of explaining, the university said they still had to pay. So again, it's different with every university.
Yeah. If I could just add, I think as well, that is normally some schools, when you get an offer, you might get a conditional offer that requires you to pay a deposit. That is where you could definitely email the school and let them know that, you are a Chevening scholar, you're waiting on a response, and some of them would probably waive the fee because they know that Chevening will cover your entire cost, because that is a cost that goes towards your tuition at the school. Not all of them might do it, but definitely reach out to them to see. So in that way, you're able to secure your unconditional offer in time for the deadline for Chevening.
Shanidia, did you have anything to add?
No, I was going to mention what Christine already said. I think communication is important. I know some colleagues as well who were exempted, but you would need to write to the universities.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you, panelists, for your inputs there. So we can move to a question from YouTube here. Seleni, will Chevening support an online program? So an online degree or an online study program? I think from my experience, the requirement is no, but from the pandemic, things may have changed. But Deborah, your experience with that as well?
Okay, so even though most of the universities, so my experience was that my university changed their course to what they call a blended learning program. So even though I was considered a full-time face-to-face student, most of my classes up until the last half of the second term were online. But the contingency was that for that second half of the term, the final term, you had to be present in class and sign that register. That may change by now. I know my university had already indicated to students that they would be moving back to face-to-face full-time. So that is dependent on what institution you choose. But Chevening's policy is that it has to be in person. The program that you apply for cannot be a strictly online program that will automatically nullify your application. It's actually part of the preliminary requirements, because part of the experience is that you go to the UK, you get the UK experience. You are there to experience the culture, networking with other Cheveners. So if you apply and if they support an online program, that just defeats the whole purpose. It's expected for you to be there.
Perfect. Thank you, Deborah. I think totally agree. The UK is an experience, and Randall and Shanidi are there right now. So if you have questions, they're online, and you can reach out to them. So I will take this question from Jose here. We answered some of them, but there's one here about what do I need to apply. So maybe Randall and Shanidi, or even in your recent experience, can you share what exactly does a scholar need just to submit an application on November 1st, before November 1st, as best as possible? So maybe we can go with Randall, if you...
Sure. Let me see if I can recall. But so the Chevening application really outlines the different things. So you need to provide your educational background, for instance, as well as uploading your documents. So if you you need to upload your bachelor's degree, your transcripts from the school. For when it comes to your professional, you have to outline, where you have been working, because one of the requirements is that you have been working for at least 2 years. I believe that is still the case. So you'll have to show your working experience. A part of the application process, and the major part will be to outline answers to I think it's about 4 essay questions. And so the application process, everything is on the portal and it has different columns or segments that you go through the process. So one of the strategies would be to fill out those preliminary stuff, your name and your address and your educational background and your professional background, and then save as much time as possible to complete the essay questions.
Yeah. I would just want to add, when it comes to your educational documents, those could be uploaded later on. Just be mindful of the deadline. But I think to answer the question, it's just your 4 essays. Just have your 4 essays ready, and of course your 3 university choices. Those are the most important things.
Excellent. And I think this links to Jose's second question, is that I don't have a UK college offer yet. Can I apply without that requirement? So I think, Jose, yes, you can. The panel had previously mentioned that you can send your application and then work. Randall's tip is to start working on your university applications right after you submit your scholarship application. So I think we covered that, right? So let's take a few more questions that we see here. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd also like to add that you're not limited to only applying to 3 universities. You can apply to as many universities as you so choose, and just ensure that your top 3 are among those. So the objective is to get one unconditional offer. All you need is one unconditional offer and you're good to go. So even though those may be your top 3 universities, send out applications to other schools. And if you get an unconditional offer for that, then you amend your application.
Yeah. You can apply to more than 3. There you go. So all our viewers, don't feel limited, and just, I guess, like you said, cast a net and try to get that one unconditional offer, right? So I think, let's see here, we have Christy asking, how is life in the UK, and did you have any trouble adjusting? Maybe Christine, do you want to jump on that one?
Sure. Life in the UK was actually new. I expected that it would have been really, really cold, but it actually isn't that cold. Randall and Shahidi, it's not freezing cold that, I had imagined that it would have been so cold that you would need tons and tons of jackets to wear, but it's actually not. The food is somewhat similar to what we have for breakfast here, except the baked beans, which we don't usually eat here in Belize, but we have the bacon and the sausage. And of course, they have toast. The fish is nice. I really like the fish. I think for me, the most important part was visiting the museums and traveling to other countries. That for me was what made my UK experience one in a lifetime. I also met different friends from all parts of the world. And so, yeah, that was my experience.
Anyone else like to add, or our recent how are recent scholars adjusting?
Oh, well, for me, I would say it took me a couple weeks to adjust to the sleeping. I think there were several factors playing a part of that, but believe me, it took me a while. I think I'm still in the process of adjusting to the sleeping because there's a 7 hour time difference. So that was, I guess, the biggest challenge. But other than that, I would say, and it depends where you are. For example, I'm in Swansea, which is in Wales. I'm close to the ocean, so it is very windy, which makes it a bit colder. I went to London over the weekend for the orientation, and I told Shanida, I don't know what you guys are doing here because it's quite hot. In Wales, it's it's kind of on and popping. It's a pretty, and it rains a lot. So try to travel with a raincoat or an umbrella or something, because especially in Swansea, it practically almost rains every day. Like, it's not hard rain, but it's going to rain. You can expect rain. One of the good things I would say is that being in the UK is that it's so easy to travel, easy to get around. There's trains, there's the buses, so that makes it a good opportunity to travel and see other places. Within our little Belize Chevening group, we're already deciding different things and places that we could go, since we're all in different areas. I'm in Wales, Shanid is in London, 2 of the other Cheveners are in Scotland, and we have someone that is in York. So we're, trying to figure ways that we could link up for a time that is convenient for all of us. But that's something really good that, you could get around quite easily. It might take a while, but, you're here. It's an experience. So try to make the most of it.
I'll tell you, Randall, after maybe when January hits, you'll forget about the umbrella. You'll walk right under the rain, just like everybody else.
I disagree. Talking about Northeast Scotland, let me tell you, the sun doesn't shine. When England was enjoying the hot heat wave in the middle of the summer, Scotland was still raining. It was still cold. It was a stark difference, I can tell you. But for those who do choose Scotland, it's a beautiful, beautiful scenic place. It's very different from the English experience. The culture is completely different, but beautiful experience nonetheless. The weather, it does lighten up, but for just a snippet, and you appreciate the sunshine that much more. But I think that just adds to the charm of the UK, that you could go to different areas and the experience is so diverse yet so similar. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
Definitely, those are. I think you heard it right. Every location is different. I was in Manchester, and I agree. The sunshine was a lot less there, but I think just be open to the experience, and you will really live the culture and the life there, right? So, I think if we take a few more questions, is the £22,000 cap only applicable to MBA courses from Josie? Has anyone recalled that requirement? Or
Yeah, I recall seeing that on the application. And from my recollection, it does only apply to MBA courses.
Yeah, I think in this case, if you have specific questions, again, there are platforms and emails that you can email Chevening if you'd like to just clarify if it's, for example, a hybrid program or you want to just ensure that it covers. You can also do that. So I would suggest, Josie, that if you have a query about a program, feel free to reach out to the Chevening email just to clarify, right?
Right. And on that note, here I wish to add that if there's also a program you wish to apply for that is not on the online application system, that you should email Chevening. I don't know if the deadline for that has already passed, but I know that there was a separate deadline for when you could apply Chevening, requesting that they add your program to the system.
Yeah. So again, feel free to send them a quick email just to verify if you have questions about your specific program of interest, right? And again, remember, you only have to put your 3 choices in. It doesn't lock you into that. So for next week, November 1st, all you need is to put your top 3 choices, but things can change. Like Deborah mentioned, apply to more and you see where it goes, right? So let's see, we can take the question from Tichana. How did you go about choosing your accommodation, and what is the cost of living like in London? I didn't live in London, so I can't share that one. But
so London is very, very expensive. But I believe that since I think it's this year that Chevening has, I think they have allotted us a bit more stipend. So Chevening, the way Chevening allots the stipend is, depending on where you're studying, where you're living, and that's how I guess they calculate what amount they're going to give you monthly. In terms of how I went about choosing my accommodations, so I am currently staying at Good Enough College, which is a private accommodation for postgraduate students, and it was an application process on its own to get in. I would say it has to do, as I mentioned earlier, with networking, because when we went to Mexico City to apply for our visa, it so happened that my university, UCL, was having an event in Mexico City. And Randall and I, we arrived coincidentally. And because I was a part of this group that was, just applicants applying to UCL, one of the Mexican guys told me, what, UCL is having an event. Come to the event. And I went along with Randall. And so I added him on Instagram, and when he came to London, I saw he posted about this place, Good Enough College, which I had no idea about. But I found it interesting. I looked it up, and I went on the website, and I just thought to myself, my goodness, I need to get into this accommodation. And so I applied, and within a week I got a positive response. So I think it's all about where, how, also as well, how close you want to live to your university. From the beginning, I knew that I wanted to live walking distance from UCL, which I knew was going to be very expensive had it not been that I were accepted to this private accommodations. So it depends how you want to, budget, how you want to handle the funds that you will receive monthly. The distance from your university. Do you want to travel every day by tube? Do you want to travel by bus to get to your university? So these are all things that I think you should take into consideration when choosing where you want to live, because you're going to be living in London for, well, my program is 10 months, for 10 months to a year. So I think it has to be a place that is affordable to you, and definitely to your comfort.
I would just add as well that most universities would have student accommodations, which are flats where you could get, and so you could also look into that. I'm staying at my students at university accommodation. It is not on the campus; it is off campus, so a bit of a walking distance, not too far. But I just look, and there are many options for my university. There was, I don't know how many, but when I did the application process, you rank them, so you could have ranked up to about 7 options. And so that's what I did. This is my first choice, second, third, fourth, and eventually you get a response. You might not get it for a first choice, but you could look at it, and depending on where you are, you could choose, because the application process will ask you, would you want somewhere that is with more mature students? Would you want a flat that maybe allows for drinking or not drinking? So it's really your preference, where you'd want to go. Would you want to have your own ensuite, which is a bathroom that you don't have to share? So things like that. I really didn't want to go through the hassle of finding something privately. So I said, I'll just go with student accommodations. It will make it easier. Luckily, I was able to get a place that is very comfortable and convenient for me.
Perfect. I think
Just to
Deborah. Okay.
add, just to add about the cost of living, if you are able to access additional funds, go ahead and do so. If you do not intend to work in the UK, which on your student visa, you can work part-time for up to 20 hours a week. And for most students, the pay is pretty decent, but it does cut into your study time. If you do not intend to work while you're over there and you can afford that extra funding from home or whatever that resource is, definitely use it. I can say from experience that in the first semester, cost of living was not as high. When the war hit and inflation struck across the UK, there was approximately a 10 to 13% inflation in cost of living. And the money was not stretching the way it did in the first semester. And that was within the space of about 2 months. And you will feel it. And even though many Chevening recipients at that time expressed the concern about, the money, the stipend not being enough, Chevening can only add so much extra to it. And I think for the Londoners, it was about £150 extra on top of what they were getting before. For others in Scotland and Wales, which are known to be a little bit lower cost of living, the increase wasn't that much. But you still have to survive. You will see the difference if that inflation continues. So if you have access to additional resources, be prepared to use it. I'm not sure what the dollar value is by now. I think it's almost close to equal with the US. When I first arrived, it was about 285, round that off to 3 to 1, depending on how you transfer your money, Western Union, or wire it through the bank or whatever. But you have to accommodate for those additional costs. Don't get too excited when that first stipend hits that cash card. Don't go spending crazy. Do not go spending crazy. Let me tell you, the money is finite. Budget.
Tips from a true
Budget.
alum.
Budget and live within your means. Set up a living schedule that you can sustain for the entire year. You're gonna want to travel, go places. It costs, so bear that in mind, when you splurge.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I think no, I definitely agree. Managing your costs is important. Looking at your finances and really finding that balance. So just be wise with your costs, and it should be a smooth year, minus any additional pandemics or wars. So we don't want to add any of those to our list. But let's hope for the best for our scholars there right now. So I think before getting to Sharice's question, which I think would be a good way to wrap up, I want to touch on Martha's question here. There are some ideas that I need to mention in more than 2 essays of my application. Can I do that? I won't use the same words, but it may be the same idea because there are key steps in my career. Maybe Christine, would you like to weigh in on this one?
Sure, I'm just reading the question again for myself. So she's basically asking if she can use the idea in one essay and use it again. I would say yes, you can do that if it's relevant and if you think that that's going to show whatever the question is asking for. I know networking and leadership they go hand in hand. So I would say yes, definitely you could use your ideas in both essays.
Anyone else
Actually,
like to
it's
weigh in? Yeah,
actually
Deborah?
it's expected that your ideas flow from essay to essay. It's actually expected. They're not supposed to be exclusive. You are supposed to the same networking examples that you show can be used in leadership and can be used in your career plan. So it's expected that they flow. So yeah, connect the dots, make it make sense. It's just that you're explaining it from a different perspective.
Perfect. And I think to add to that, in my case, I did have some ideas repeating, but I think the key there, Martha, is to make sure you don't make it sound the same. And I think I go back to the point that Shanita made about having a fresh pair of eyes or two or three to really go through your essay and point out, maybe you might be repeating yourself, but it's not about repeating yourself, but about connecting the dots, like Deborah mentioned, right? So that's just some more inputs. Does anyone else want to add to that one, or I think we could move to another? Okay. So I see Jose is also asking a question. Deborah, I think that you touched on, would you be able to do part-time work while pursuing the scholarship? Could you highlight that again, Deborah? Was it, you said
Yes,
20 hours?
your student visa allows you to work up to 20 hours per week, not more than that, because then it becomes taxable, I believe. But yeah, you're allowed to work up to 20 hours a week. And for a part-time student, if your schedule allows it, that part-time salary is pretty good. It's pretty good. I believe it's a little bit over £10 an hour, depending on
Yeah.
where you work. So, I mean, if you can fit it in,
Mhm.
absolutely. And a lot of Cheveners, many Cheveners go there for the extra benefit of working, and some are able to land some really well-paying jobs.
Yeah. No, I think if I may ask, so Martha, I mean not Martha, sorry, Deborah, you worked while you were on campus, or?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I considered the idea for a minute, but I changed
Mhm.
my mind. I thought I'd be spreading myself too thin.
Okay.
And
And
I
you,
didn't need
Christine?
to, but
Okay,
if you need to, you can.
sure. No.
Yeah.
And Christine, did you while you were there?
No, I was going to
No.
add that it's highly recommended that you do not work. But like Deborah is saying, if you need to or if you want the experience, you can go ahead. But
Mhm.
a 1 year degree is very time consuming, and I'm sure these guys who are there right now, the work is the last thing that you want to think about going. So it's kind of like spreading yourself thin,
Mhm.
and you might not dedicate as much time to your work if you do that. So
Especially when dissertation time comes around. It
Yeah.
is most dissertations, depending on your program, are self-taught,
Yeah.
completely research based, and it's extremely time consuming, and you have to budget that time. So imagine that plus balancing responsibilities of a job, it can get hectic. Some
Yeah.
people do it in the first semester, the early part of the second term, where their schedule isn't as hectic. But nonetheless, it's work-life balance. That's a personal choice based on your circumstances.
Yeah.
yes.
If I could share, so while I was at the University of Manchester, to answer your question, Jose, I did work part time. So my job was with the alumni outreach department, and I would only work about 10 hours a week. We used to help fundraise for the University of Manchester. So, and like Deborah said, it did help me, have a little extra pocket money for little socials that I may want to go to. So I think that was very helpful. So to answer your question, you can, but whether it's possible is up to you on how you manage your time, right? So it was difficult, I could say, but it was manageable because it was 10 hours. Um, so I think, Martha, I see a very interesting comment. Would any of you be keen to review my essays? You guys are awesome. So thank you first, Martha. That's really kind of you. And I think Lori as well, thanking us. I think about reviewing your essays, I will ask if you can maybe send an email about your degree choice to the Belize Chevening Alumni Association. Again, our email is cheveningbelize@gmail.com, and then we can see who we can connect you to, preferably someone in your field. If you're studying, let's say, something in healthcare, we can link you to that. If it's development studies, we can link you to someone. So drop us an email and we can see how we connect you. So I think, to wrap up then to our panel, and I know we're hitting the 1.5 hour mark, and we have some colleagues in the UK, so they would probably want to try to get some rest tonight. So I will go back to Sharice's question, and I think I want to use this to segue into our closing. So Sharice is asking, apart from the STAR system, what would you suggest in terms of last minute application tweaks? So I want to add to that for our panel tonight. If you can help us to close with a final tip, something that was very useful to you in submitting your application. So I'll ask each panelist to really take this question from Sharice, but give our viewers, one brief tip that you would give them to submit before the deadline. So maybe we could start with Randall.
Sure. I think what was very helpful for me was really seeking the assistance of others. I had actually, Debbie was one of my go-to persons that I was constantly messaging. But if you could find that person, a past scholar, a current scholar, feel free to just message. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. Feel free to message if you have any final questions that you want some clarity on something before you make the final submission. But I think it's really helpful if you have somebody who has gone through the process. And knows what it was like to help give you that final advice or that final push so that you could get the application. So definitely reach out to someone so that you could get that assistance.
Excellent. Thank you, Randall. And I'm glad, again, you could see how Randall reached out to someone in his field. And so I think that is very helpful. Again, maybe we can move to Christine. Any last words of advice before the application deadline?
Sure thing. To answer Therese's question, apart from the stars, you can use that for most of the essays, but you can also use the smart one to explain your career goals. That would be my tip for the essays. And what you want to do too is you want to look at YouTube videos and see the questions that they ask during the interviews, because they're going to ask you the same questions that you're writing your essays about. And so that, for me, that was very important. I saw how they were asking the questions during the interviews, and so I decided when I write my essay that I'm going to be real. I'm going to make sure that it's relevant. I'm going to make sure that it's something that I actually did, and not something that I kind of like pretty top and made it look like. Because when you go to the interview, they're going to ask you that same thing. And so what causes nervousness is when you didn't really do what you said in your essay. And so now you have to find a way to try to explain that to the interviewers. So that would be my tip. Make sure that what you're writing in your essays is something that you've done honestly. And so when you go to if you're selected and you go to the interview, it will come more or less easy for you to explain yourself. So yeah.
Thank you, Christine. So we've heard two good tips: reach out to persons in your network, in your field, and be real in your essay. Be as honest as you can. So thank you, Randall and Christine. So maybe we can move to Shanidi. Any last words of advice?
Yeah, I think it would be to just ensure that all the essays, they come together like a puzzle, and as an extra tip, if you can tie them to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, I think, yeah, that would be my extra tip. Link your goal to what the UK is doing in our country.
Excellent. So again, we have another tip here, very key. Link your essay to macro goals or national goals. Try to link your impact, right? So very, very, very important, Shanidi. So Deborah, I leave you to close off with your final tip, and then we finalize our webinar for today.
My tip is to stop using big words that you don't normally use in real life. I'm guilty of it too. No shade. When we write these essays and this application, there's that urge to right click, synonym, pick the fanciest word out to the list. Don't do that. Don't do that. Some of the best essays in these applications are the ones where the language is very simple, very clear, concise. It's easy to follow. When you write that essay, imagine that you can hand that essay to a stranger on the street and they can pick it up and understand what you're saying in that essay. It makes it clear, it makes it personable, and it shows us that you know exactly what you want and how you intend to achieve it. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that very relevant tip again. So don't use big words. Keep it simple. Keep it clear. You heard it yourself from an alumni. So
And you don't have to reach 500 words either. That's your limitation. Sometimes you can say exactly what you need to say in 350 words. It may
very,
look like a little bit, but the point is that you made your point. If
very,
you
very
find yourself rambling, you're doing too much.
excellent. No, thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah. I think we've all heard four very different closing tips and ideas. I think this webinar has provided a lot of information, but there may still be burning questions. So I think we can close this webinar, but first I want to extend our sincere thanks to all of our panelists for participating today in this information webinar. We as the Chevening Alumni Association hope that we can do it every year before the application closes, and particularly thanks to our scholars who are in the UK right now. So you're seeing them live while they're advancing their Chevening journeys, and so that could be you next year. So again, all you need to do is submit your application and get started on the process and the timeline. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the Heritage Education Network of Belize, particularly Sylvia Batty, who is also an alumni, a Chevening scholar. So for hosting this webinar with us, many, many thanks to HENB and the entire team there who supported the Alumni Association. So for prospective applicants, again, please feel free to reach out to the Alumni Association. You heard that networking is a key tip. So again, we do help to support applicants as mentors, providing guidance tips. You have 5 faces here on the screen, so feel free to reach out to us if you have a burning question before you submit next week. Remember that we are available on our Facebook page at Chevening Alumni Belize, and you can contact us via email at cheveningbelize@gmail.com. So again, we encourage everyone to submit your application before November 1st. Do so before the deadline so that you don't experience any system issues. And I want to thank all the participants for joining in this information webinar. We really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. And we look forward to all of your applications coming in next week so that we can have a Chevening scholarship group that's record high. Typically, we average between anywhere from 3 scholars to the highest, maybe 9 or 11. So maybe next year we reach 15, like some of the bigger countries. So, but to do that, we need more applications. So again, go online, start working on your essays if you haven't, and if you have questions, reach out to us. So with that, I wish everyone a pleasant good night, and remember to take care and reach out to us. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and many thanks to our panel. Take care, everyone.
Bye.